sneaking through. I know. That's the whole point. I've tried to scrub it from the internet. I've tried to ban it completely. I've tried to make it like it never happened, but it did. It's part of the show. Fake Kellen Winslow tweets, "The time has come to hashtag crank it up with @Toby in Houston, hashtag Romageddon." You're right, the time has come. My final debt to square up, the Toby in Houston call. Now, if you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you've no doubt heard a reference to this white whale of audio. It is without question the most beloved phone call in the history of the show. The history of a show that's taken tens of thousands of phone calls. Think of all the smack-offs, 23 of them. This phone call is more memorable to you clones than anything that's ever happened in any of those events. I mean, it's like jungle folklore to the highest degree. It's on a mantle above the mantle. But for me, it's always been in a grave beneath a grave. And I have not unearthed this phone call for anyone or anything, but it hasn't stopped you from trying. Almost every guest that swings through the jungle will get solicited on Twitter to ask me to play that call, the Toby call. And a few of them have actually tried. Scott Brooks tried. Andrew Bogut tried. Hell, Kevin Durant, the MVP of the NBA Finals, asked for Toby. He asked for the call on this show back in 2011. Great to have you on. Thank you.
Hey, Jim, can you do me a favor?
You got it.
Can you say what's up to Toby in Houston for me?
Yo, Toby in Houston, what up?
All right, man. Appreciate that.
Do you know who that is, though, Kevin, or did somebody feed that to you?
Yeah, that's my man. I know who it is.
Who is it?
It's one of my guys' best friends.
All right, man. You're being straight, right? You know the story behind Toby, right?
Yeah.
What?
Say it again?
What's the story behind Toby?
Oh, that's Larry Brown's guy, right?
It's Kevin Durant. We literally had that conversation on this show. And that goes way back to 2011. It shows you the reach of the show and what that call means to everybody. It shows you my grip on this thing, though. And that no one, not even my good friend and jungle legend Boomer Esiason, has been able to pry it loose.
I'm ready to, as they say in Houston, crank it up, Jim. Where is Toby in Houston? I don't know, where is he? I don't know where he is. I was so looking forward to meeting him. I thought he was going to be a special guest here.
All right, so Boomer's tried that probably a half dozen times. So here we are, inching closer to the moment that you've all been waiting for. But first, a little historical context. June 24th, 2005, Getaway Friday. I'm going into a long vacation. Mr. Automatic, Jay Stu, was on the phones. In fact, I want to save that thought. He was on the phones, and he screens this call. Stu could better describe what happened. I know what happened after that. I don't know. I'm not privy to what that conversation was about. Except the call that was on hold is not what I thought it was going to be. And I was into it because at that point, even a year after his death, all I was getting were emails about Marlon Brando. About how Brando could go into the all-you-can-eat buffet Hall of Fame. And I'd gotten about an hour's worth of that, and I was so happy to get a legitimate phone call. This guy said he wanted to talk about Larry Brown. I'm like, great, let's talk about Larry Brown. And then the call. Here's the thing. I've always swore that I would never play this call ever again, that I would quit or retire before I ever played the call again. But y'all wouldn't let it go. So I finally said, if Larry Brown, the guy that the call was about, were to call me and say, Romy, because he'd always Romy me. Romy, go ahead and play the Toby in Houston call. Then I would do it. But I knew Larry Brown would never do that. Just as I knew that you clones could never get my podcast to #1 overall on iTunes. Except you did. And here we are again. And now I have to do the one thing that I swore that I would never ever do. Play the Toby in Houston call. Look, I've got no idea if this is on the list of things that the FCC says you cannot say. I have no idea if somebody in New York is sitting on the dump button, or if I'm looking at a long suspension, or if it is cause for them to fire me. I don't know. I just don't know. But I do know that I promised you that I would play it, and that everything else that happened today, I promised, and I did. So, let's go ahead and do this too. You clones got the Jim Rome podcast to #1 on iTunes. So here is your ultimate bone. The bone that I said that I would never, ever toss to you. The Toby in Houston bone. And when you hear me at the end of the call, that is my legitimate reaction on the show when it happened. This is the famous Toby in Houston call that was never, ever supposed to see the light of day ever again. Dear Jim, lay off Marlon Brando. He's the only man to win 2 Oscars and be inducted into the Sizzler and Hometown Buffet Hall of Fames. Sincerely, Jason in Brentwood. Back to back to back. You should be very proud of yourself, Jason. Or not at all. Jim, tell the clones to lay off the Brando smack. The reason his clothes are so big is because I made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. Signed all-you-can-eat buffets. All right, look. Stop ruining my talk show. Sizzler does not have troughs, and Hometown Buffet does not have a Hall of Fame. Stop ruining my show. Back to your phone calls. Toby in Houston. Hi, Toby. How are you?
How you doing, Jim?
Great.
Good. Hey, just getting back from the game in San Antonio. I used to live in San Antonio, and actually when Larry Brown was there, I was out at a workout club, finishing my workout, just got out of the shower, tying up my shoes, and guy comes up to the locker next to me, opens up the door, foot away from my face, drops his towel. I look over, there's a crank right in my face. Larry Brown.
Yeah, we're all better for that story, Toby. I frankly have nothing to add to that. Let's move on. Huh. I got a question. Where the hell am I supposed to go from there? Here's a great jungle segment. We started off with emails about Marlon Brando's trough at Sizzler and somebody turning into Larry Brown's crank at a health club. There's a good segment. That's a segment that I'm proud of. I think that I should just break off right now, end the show, and ship this immediately to the Radio Hall of Fame, wherever that is. Because there will never be a better segment than that. All right, so that was me back then in 2005. I mean, I'll admit this. I don't recall being as rattled as I was after a telephone call as I was after that telephone call. And I meant that sincerely. What the hell do I do now? I cannot believe that guy just said that. And how did that guy get through? Well, why don't we find out? For some historical context, we're joined right now by the guy who screened that phone call. Mr. Automatic, Jason Stewart, longtime employee of the program who screened thousands of phone calls, including that one. Jay Stu, what's up, brother?
Jim, great to hear your voice. How are you, my man?
Stu, I'm so great. It's great to hear your voice.
I'll tell you what, you and I have hundreds of mutual friends on Twitter. And whenever this came to be this week, if I didn't get one, I got 100 @tweets on Twitter asking me if I'm going to listen, what I did that day, and would I call in. And I thought, absolutely, but can I get through the call screener? And Hawk has let me on.
Well, Stu, you know you are always welcome on this program. You are still family. You did a great job for me. And you've got intel that nobody else has. You were in that chair that day. You took that phone call. It was a long time ago. What do you remember about that?
Oh, man, I do remember it like it was yesterday, and I remember the Marlon Brando thing, but I remember getting this phone call in and listening to the story. And you know me, Jim, I was like this old, griddled guy, bitter. I let calls in, but what was not, I was very deciphering with calls got through and which calls didn't, right? So at this point, I heard the story, and I had to say, like, wait a minute. Tell that story again. I had to make sure I heard it correct. And you know me, Jim, I would always put calls up on the screen. I would always let you know who it was, where they were from, and what they wanted to talk about. But by no means would I ever go out on a limb for a caller. I'm not going to put my livelihood in jeopardy to vouch for a caller. But I remember specifically after taking the call, after gathering myself and putting my head on the desk and laughing, getting in your ear and saying, Jim, I think you should take this call. And I remember in the comments box on the call screen saying, only, Jim, an incredible story about Larry Brown. I remember saying that. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, Stu. Because if I had known what the story was, I clearly would not have taken the phone call.
And I think the most frequent question I've gotten over the years from clones, and I remember Kyle Bray used to always ask me this question, like, do you remember at the time thinking this was going to be legendary? Like this is kind of this a call out of many thousands that's going to stick out. And I think at the time I did think that. Like there was something about that story and the delivery and the language that I'm like, wait a minute, I think this might be able to make a mark. And it obviously did.
It obviously did, Stu, and you're right. Not only was it the story, but this guy, Toby, whoever this character is, the way he delivered that story, the way he delivered and sold that story and set it up, it really was genius. But I mean this sincerely. I thought it would never see the light of day, Stu. I thought that you and I would never have this conversation, at least not on the air, and that it would get played back once again, yet here we are. Here we freaking are.
It's a monumental day, and just hearing it back, Jim, brought back all the great memories, and I'm glad that I could at least add a little bit here today, and I'm glad I got through the call screener. Hawk let me through, and amazing day, and hello, clones.
Stu, the clones, I'm looking at Twitter right now. They're pumped to hear your voice. I know you've got your own show to do, so let me send you off with your song, Mr. Automatic. Stu, that made it better. That helped a lot. Thanks for the historical context. Have a great day and a great show, Stu. You're welcome here anytime. Jay Stu. Here you go, clones. Clones love Jay Stu. They've always loved Jay Stu. He's Mr. Automatic. Jason Stewart had a song written about him. That was also another one of the greatest days in the history of the program when that DVD came, or that CD came in the mail, and I popped that thing in. I must have listened to it 50 straight times. I could not stop laughing. Mr. Automatic. 3-day weekend. It was a smash. Production companies were calling up and saying, we want to make a video. These guys all of a sudden were getting gigs all over town. All right, time now for your reaction. We've got one last segment, so we're wide open. React to anything you've heard. And that's the famous Toby in Houston call. That happened. That happened on the show. Time now for a sports update. Hey, good news is I'm still on the air right now.